Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining us today on the topic of educator effectiveness and how diverse institutions of higher education prepare culturally responsive educators. We're glad you're all here with us. As was mentioned, I'm Elizabeth Greniger. I'm today's webinar facilitator. And joining me for today's topic is Dr. Mary Dilworth. I'm going to talk a bit more about Mary in a moment, but before I do that, I want to find out who all of you are. In a moment, you should see a poll come up on your screen. And I'd like you to select the response that best fits the role that you serve in. It's wonderful to see such a diverse audience, especially given today's topic. We're hoping that the content of today's webinar will speak to those of you in higher ed, but also has broader applicability to those serving in other aspects of education. We received a lot of questions in advance of today's webinar, and the hope is that we can address many of them through today's presentation. There are some that did go beyond the scope of what we'll talk about today, but we're going to do our best to address your questions, and we really do look forward to also hearing from all of you through our polls and through our parking lot today. All right, so let me tell you a little bit more about Mary. Mary Dilworth is a nationally recognized expert on education research, policy, and program development. She's best known for her work in teaching, teacher education, and professional development. She's received special recognition for her accomplishments in the areas of teacher and learner diversity and equity issues. In the fall of 2015, Dr. Dilworth completed an appointment as a co-principal investigator for a National Science Foundation project that was designed to recruit, prepare, license, and employ STEM professionals from underrepresented groups for middle and high school science teaching. In 2012 and 13, she served as a visiting professor and the director of the Center for Urban Education at the University of the District of Columbia. She's also served as the President for Research in Higher Education at the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards and as Senior Vice President of the American Association of Colleges for Teacher Education. At this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Mary Dilworth. Mary?
Hi, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be able to talk to all of you today. And hopefully I will learn some things from you and your questions, and hopefully some things I have to say will be helpful to you as you work to make your programs more diverse and culturally responsive. Before I begin, there's a few things I would like for you to know. While I may be considered an expert on a variety of things, technology is not one of them. I am a baby boomer struggling to stay connected and may well forget to advance the slide at the appropriate time, so please forgive me. I also know a fair amount about teacher diversity and student and teacher learning. However, I'm not as informed as possibly I should be on other important matters like English language learners, for instance, which are very, very important topics. So I just hope that you would know and understand that, and know that there's a great deal of amount of information from my colleagues out in the field that can inform questions related to that particular topic. And I also talk a bit about the topics of focus, okay, or the webinar. webinar objectives. Okay. Again, during this, and I'm sorry for the disconnection, let me just repeat that I am not a technology wizard, and again, I apologize for not possibly advancing the slides when they should be. I am also a considered an expert on a variety of topics, but there are some important themes that I'm not as well versed as I possibly should be. For example, English language learners. But there are a fair amount of my colleagues in the field who have done some excellent work that could respond very well to questions that you may have in that regard. And then also I would like for everyone to know and understand that everything that I am mentioning is substantiated in some way by the research, and that you will get a fairly comprehensive reference list at the end of this focus. As we talk, there are a few things to consider. There are many meanings to the term diversity, as most of us know. It can refer to race, ethnicity, gender, religion, sexual preference, and exceptionalities. In this webinar, we will focus on the definition of diversity referring to race, ethnicity. And I hope we can agree on a few important points here. Race, ethnicity, and racial, ethnic, and linguistic diversity must be considered a strength. This includes everyone and omits no single particular group. I hope that we all understand also that great teachers generally and teachers of color in particular are an invaluable asset as we work to provide every student a world-class education. And lastly, greater diversity in the teaching force will not happen as a coincidence of the teacher quality agenda. It requires positive and deliberate action, and now versus later. Another thing we should consider is the current educational environment for teacher preparation. As many people know, in the last century, schools, colleges, and departments of education were the primary suppliers of teachers for the nation's pre-K through 12 schools. While this is still the case, today, teacher preparation sector has expanded beyond brick-and-mortar academies to include for-profit organizations, community colleges, and school districts that often conduct their work at varying times and in virtual settings. It's important to note that alternative routes are appealing to many aspiring educators and those educators of color in particular. And when we think about preparation and practice, we also need to consider that some teacher preparation programs are abbreviated to a very, very few short weeks, and others are more comprehensive in fashion and incorporate pedagogical knowledge with site-based experiences. Lastly, we know that new teachers are recruited to the PK through 12 sector that has expanded to include public and private charter schools with schedules, curriculums, and protocols that typically vary from traditional and public schools. So another
Mary, it looks like we lost you again. Are you still there?
Talk a minute about what the research says about teacher diversity. Research certainly supports diversifying the teaching force. It shows that teachers of color, especially African American teachers, are more motivated than others to work with students of color to improve their academic performance. Although no one I'm aware of advocates that PK through 12 students should only be taught by teachers of their same race, ethnicity, there are academic and social advantages for all students and students of color in particular to have same race teachers as part of their education experience. So for instance, Thomas D., who's a professor at Stanford, found that same race pairing of students and teachers significantly increased the math and reading scores of both black and white students by roughly 3 to 4 percentage points. These effects were even stronger for poor black students in segregated schools. Gloria Ladson-Billings and Pedro Noguero offer that teachers who have knowledge of children's out-of-school lives and cultures are less likely to confuse cultural difference for cultural or intellectual disadvantage. In addition, a shared racial and cultural background can facilitate what we might call, quote-unquote, a warm demander relationship between teachers and students, since high expectations are seen more as a natural byproduct of that relationship built on mutual respect. And a number of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the notion of warm demander through the work of Lisa Delpit and others. Lastly, one thing I'd like to mention is that Plant, in 2009, and her colleagues explored what they called the Obama effect, examining what impact Barack Obama's presidential campaign and the resulting high levels of counter-stereotypic exposure to a black authority figure might have on participants of other races. What they found was a dramatically decreased level of implicit anti-black prejudice and stereotyping. So again, there are a wide range and a significant number of factors that teachers of color impact in terms of to help students learn in a better way. When we talk about diversity and let's talk a minute about diversity and achievement gap. About 30 years ago, a demographer, Harold Hodgkinson, wrote an Education Week report entitled, "Here They Come, Ready or Not." He was referring to the increase of African American, Hispanic, Asian Pacific American, Native, and Alaskan Native American students entering our PK through 12 schools. The piece generated quite a few pre-Twitter tweets, and most people nodded their heads in agreement. He made some statements that we find in conversations even today. For instance, he mentioned, without a middle-class majority, we simply will not be the United States of America. He was so right about the fact that, quote, they are coming. Actually, they are here and represent over half of the students in our pre-elementary and secondary schools. On the matter of being ready, well, that's debatable, given the poor academic performance of many youngsters from these particular groups. At the time of his report, approximately 26% of PK through 12 teachers were from these groups, and today that number is a mere 18%. At the time, we seemingly understood the value of teachers of color, and there were scores of programs and policies that were developed to advance the mission with generous funding from foundations. These foundations, like the Ford and Wallace Foundation, incentivized a good number of people to join the teaching ranks, but not nearly enough to establish parity. Many of these programs have since gone by the wayside, and we now have a national teaching force that is more homogeneous than ever before. While we have understood for a long time that a diverse teaching force can help to stem the PK through 12 academic achievement gap, there are issues that are in our ability to resolve. So, for instance, teacher diversity is growing rapidly, but teacher diversity is not growing rapidly. Concerns about academic achievement between students from various racial ethnic backgrounds is prominent in virtually all policies and programs. But the need for teachers with similar backgrounds and cultural competence to close this gap is not. There are numerous programs designed to enhance teacher quality, but they seldom mention diversity, and relatively few are designed to enhance diversity. In this and the next slide, we see that during the period between 1993 and 2008, for the majority of states, an increase in minority students was not matched by an increase in minority teachers. For example, in Arizona, there was a 16% increase in minority students during 1993 to 2008, and yet there was an 8% decrease in the number of minority teachers during that same period. As a result of the inverse pattern of growth for minority teachers in relation to minority students, a colleague and I, Marcus Coleman, in a study that we did, suggests that the minority students have decreased possibility of having a teacher of their own race and cultural heritage today. During the same period of time, in the Mid-Atlantic region, for instance, in Delaware, there was a fairly large increase, 12% of students of color, and a modest increase in teachers of color, about 3%. For Maryland, a fairly high increase in students, about 12%, and for teachers, about 11%. And for the state of Pennsylvania, a 6% rise in students and a 5% decrease in teachers. Okay, let's talk a minute about the research base. What I'd like to do is to describe some of the research on diverse institutions of higher education and their importance in preparing culturally responsive educators. I should also point out that there are very, very few institutions in this country that don't have some level of diversity. But again, there are a number of institutions that have greater diverse student populations than others. I also would like to mention that there is not a great deal of research that focuses primarily on minority serving institutions that I mentioned earlier, such as historically black colleges and universities and Hispanic universities and tribal colleges in terms of teaching, in terms of their preparation of teachers. However, there is a fairly new report that I'll mention later that does have some more, has some new and important information. Minority serving institutions do play an important role in terms of students of color. Roughly 12% of education major awards in bachelor level degrees, master level degrees, post-baccalaureate certificates, and post-master certificates of students were conferred by minority serving institutions. In this particular chart, we will see that African American enrollees. This is the chart developed by the Department of Education. Or a map rather. The enrollment African American enrollees are concentrated in programs located in the Southeast and the Mid-Atlantic and Arizona. And I should mention the fact that there's such a strong African American presence in Arizona is because of the existence of the University of Phoenix. And so the enrollment, the institution is located, the main campus of the institution is located in Arizona, and that's where it shows up. In the next slide, we also see Hispanic enrollees are concentrated in the Southwest, in Florida, and in New York, in the New York City area. MSIs award about 46% of teacher education bachelor degrees for African American students, 49% for Hispanics, and 12% for American Indians. far higher levels than the proportion of all minorities that these schools enroll. In other words, I'm sorry, I'm back on. Alternative routes to teacher education tend to enroll more racially diverse populations of candidates than traditional teacher preparation programs. 42% of teacher candidates enroll in an alternative teacher preparation program not based at an institution of higher education. 35% of teacher candidates enrolled in an alternative teacher preparation program based in an institution of higher education were individuals of color. In comparison, 26% of teacher candidates enrolled in a traditional teacher preparation program were individuals of color.
Okay, Mary, thank you for that wonderful overview and really setting the stage and talking about some of the research foundation for today's topic. We do have several folks asking some questions over in the parking lot, and then we're going to open it up for a poll for our audience. Before I open up the poll, I wanted to touch on a few of the questions that I see folks asking here. A little while back, Nicole was referring to when you mentioned the Nancy Love book. She was wondering if that is the particular title is the Collaborative Inquiry, because she was mentioning that in her district in Pennsylvania they're using that, and she agrees that it's great work. So maybe you can confirm for us, is that what you were referring to?
No, it sounds like a very interesting book, but no, I don't believe I was referring to that volume at all. I'm sorry. As
a side note for folks, I know people were very interested in some of the references. If you do download the copy of the presentation, the last slides have the reference list, so you can find the full citations for all of those that were mentioned on our slides thus far and that will be mentioned. So you'll have that comprehensive list there. Another question that came in, people are asking about the data, and as I mentioned, that can be found in the copy of the PowerPoint that you can download. Larry was asking, we're talking about on the few slides that talked about the data of the teacher and student data. He said, might there be more recent figures for percentage of minority students and minority teachers change? I believe that is the most current, most recent data, but can you confirm that that is the most recent for us?
I would actually say there are some more recent reports that some of them have been released as recently as this past spring. There is a report that was issued by the U.S. Department of Education in May of 2016 that talks about, I believe the title of it is The State of Diversity in the Teaching Profession or something to that effect. But again, it's in the reference list. That's a very, very good report. There is a report that was issued in 2015 by the Albert Shanker Institute, that also talks about, it's a fairly comprehensive report on teacher diversity. There is a very, very recent report that was issued by the Penn Center on Minority Serving Institutions that also has a fair amount of data on teacher diversity. So there are a lot of new and updated resources on this particular topic.
Very good. Thank you, Mary. I'm going to just touch on one more, and I know there's several questions there in the parking lot, but we'll kind of switch gears and get back to those a little bit later. One other question here is asking, are there any cultural competence level assessments you can recommend? And I know we talked about this briefly. This was one of the questions that someone asked when they registered.
Right. And that's a very, very good question. There are a lot of assessments that are made available to the public and to school districts. And of course, as you would expect, they certainly would range in quality. And I am not in the position to necessarily recommend one over another. What I can say is that there is a Center for Culturally Responsive Evaluation and Assessment at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign that looks at methods and strategies for conducting culturally responsive evaluation and assessment. And I think that that would be an excellent resource for any school districts or institutions that are looking to craft something specific to their needs.
Great, thank you for that. And I do know there are several questions coming in, so we'll get back to those in a moment. But what you see on your screen now is an open-ended question. We're interested in hearing more from you and about your experiences. This question asks, how have you seen institutions of higher ed address racial or ethnic diversity needs in your community? So we're really interested in having you all share some of your experiences. You'll see a poll come up, and you'll have the opportunity to type in a response. While folks are doing that, let me see if I can touch on one more question. Let's see here. Okay, a few folks have a similar question to Christina, wondering, you did mention alternative certification programs, and Christina's wondering if you have a perception that those are more appealing to teacher candidates of color, and if there's any research on that.
The answer is yes. They tend to be more appealing than traditional programs to potential teachers of color. We did do, in the 2014 report that I mentioned earlier that I did with Marcus Coleman, there is data that clearly indicates that as well, and it's also substantiated in the Department of Education's, U.S. Department of Education's May 2016 report on teacher diversity. There may be a variety of reasons. There may be a variety of reasons why they are more appealing. Some of them may be that alternative routes are simply quicker than a number of other programs, and that the financial investment may not be as heavy as for some other programs. I need to also mention that a good number of quote-unquote traditional colleges and universities do have alternative route programs as well as your typical traditional programs. The other thing is they are not alternative certification programs, there are alternative routes to certification, and there's a difference in that. So yes, in fact, they do seem to be more appealing to teachers of color. That's a very good question.
Very good. We'll touch on one more. This is from someone who teaches at Hunter College, and they're very interested in diversifying their faculty and recruiting a more diverse teaching force, but have found it to be very challenging. Actually, I guess there's no question there, but I think a lot of folks are kind of echoing that sentiment and the fact that that's an issue that they're facing in higher ed, and I didn't know if you had a thought on that. Certainly having a diverse faculty advantages the institution just generally. Again, a diversity in a school is very important, and diversity at the university is equally important. Again, individuals from different backgrounds bring with them
a variety of experiences that can help inform the curriculum and the approaches that programs use in teaching all students. And the difficulties in attracting faculty to particular types of institutions may be similar to attracting individuals of color to particular school systems. Is it a welcoming environment? Are there advantages for individuals to work with a particular university or college more so than another? Once they are in an institution, are they allowed to operate as informed professionals without having an added burden of serving as mentors for all students, all students of color, and other students? The current Secretary of Education has mentioned the burden of African American and Latino males when they are teaching in PK through 12 schools. Oftentimes they're identified as the disciplinarians and are given students who are particularly have particular special needs, and that needs to be recognized, appreciated, and considered when you're trying to include them in your learning community.
Very, very good. Thank you for sharing that. We have a lot of sharing over here in the poll, and I want to turn us to that. Mary, if you can take a glance through some of the responses there and see if there's anything that jumps out at you.
Okay, I'm taking a look now. I see. Okay, I see a mention of the Call Me Mr. program, for instance, and I would say there are a fair number of programs that focus on African American, Latino, and other males of color that are operating throughout the United States, and that are very good. And so there's not one single program. If you are trying to identify individuals, African American males or Latino males or teachers of color generally, there are a host of programs out there that are designed to do this kind of work. Also, I think while I'm not, again, I'm not a technology wizard, I do know that there are a fair number of blogs and chat rooms and websites, online communities that are designed from teachers of color for teachers of color, where they're talking about issues that they're finding in school or in their preparation programs. And it might be very, very useful to take some time to see what kinds of things they are saying that are attractive to them and what kinds of things that are challenging to them. I also see a comment about urban teacher residency and TFA programs that are diverse. Indeed, they are very, very diverse. There are a number of teacher residency academies, what we call them generally, because there are some of those located in rural areas as well, and that they are a non-traditional programs, but they're also very, very good programs that identify individuals post-baccalaureate who already have a degree and want to pursue the teaching as a profession. The attractiveness of those kinds of programs is that individuals are allowed to begin work, if you will, on day one in a classroom, and also throughout the week they are taking courses at a college, a university, or a school district, and they are also oftentimes and typically compensated for that. There are a number of those programs around the country. A number of them were funded by the U.S. Department of Education in the past 4 to 6 years. But I would have to say that while a number of them do have a highly diverse highly diverse cohorts, very few of them are actually supported by minority-serving communities or institutions, and that's something that where a majority institutions might look to partner with those type of institutions to develop those kinds of programs.
And that leads me to one of the themes that was jumping out at me in the comments here, just that notion of a partnership. And so I see a lot of examples of partnerships between universities and local school districts, universities and the community, university and various programs. And I think that you will talk a little bit about that, but that idea is that it really does take more than just the university to create a successful program that really hones in on this diversity.
Correct.
All right, so we're going to move this one out of the way and get going into the next section where we talk a little bit more about teachers of color and the culturally responsive pedagogy.
Excuse me, Elizabeth, did we do the poll?
Yep, that was what was just up there. Folks were responding to that question.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I apologize. Okay, I got caught up in it. Okay, there's a great deal of research that indicates that teachers of color bring a cultural perspective to their work. And, I'm sorry, again, I've messed up.
Mary, I think we're on slide 21.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I apologize. There's, for instance, we understand that teachers of color are particularly sensitive to the cultural needs of their students. We also know that teachers are a parochial group. In other words, they often come from the same or similar communities from where they teach. So that what we will find typically is that individuals of color are often situated in communities that are highly diverse. We also know that teachers of color have personal experience navigating racial stereotypes about academic achievement and can equip students to combat these stereotypes. We know that they may be perceived more favorably by students of color because they serve as role models and are particularly sensitive to the cultural needs of their students. We know that oftentimes they have a personal experience navigating racial stereotypes about academic and achievement and can equip students to combat these stereotypes. And in a fairly recent and highly publicized report that a number of you may have seen, the authors Turing and Halpin have found that all student groups have more positive ratings of minority teachers, including white students and Asian students. And this suggests that teachers of color can translate their experiences and identities to form rapport with students that do not share the same race or the ethnicity. Let's talk a little bit about the current theory. I don't know if we would call it theory, but theories. In my view, the parlance in the public policy perspective on this particular theme has changed over time, and whatever we do going forward ought to take some of these things into account. 30 years ago, efforts were framed around issues of supply and demand. Okay, and this particular slide is sort of made up, was made to sort of resemble the in and out charts that you see at the beginning of the new year, what's in and what's out. Okay, and it certainly is always changing, but just generally these are some of my perceptions. So again, about 30 years ago, efforts were framed around issues of supply and demand, that the teaching force should mirror the PK through 12 school population. Today's discourse has shifted a little towards matters of distribution. We're talking more about where teachers of color are situated, or where quality teachers are situated, and what happens to be their racial ethnic background. The political messaging for the past 20 years has generally focused on quality teaching. This is all good, certainly, but the professional messaging, i.e. the conversations within colleges and universities and school districts, has generally focused on the need for culturally diverse and responsive quality teaching force. When the issue of minority teacher shortage was first raised a number of years back, it was framed within the already accepted approach of let's all get along with one another. It's sort of like the kumbaya approach. To know me is to love me. Nowadays, it's diverse. It's a little bit more direct. Diversity now rules the day. It is not just limited to race, ethnicity, but includes language, sexual orientation, religion, etc. Also today, there is greater interest and zest for gender, and we just finished talking a little bit about that, i.e. for African American and Latino men. There's more on conversation and discussion and interest, of course, on issues of immigration status and generation, and also some conversation and discussion about generational issues. And then also, and more recently, there's more discussion about the impact of social economic status, which in some instances trumps the conversation on race and culture. Those are just some of my observations over time. Okay, here we're talking about some practice. What practices do minority-serving institutions use to best prepare pre-K through educators? There's some distinguishing characteristics that we'll talk a little bit about. Their mission typically includes statements that address the expectation that their students serve the community. And they help prepare culturally responsive educators and do so while meeting the needs and preferences for students from underrepresented groups. What we find in terms of some of the distinguishing characteristics from these groups is that they forge quality preparation and effective practice despite limited support. A lot of these institutions do not have a great deal of financial support. They maintain culture and the pursuit of economic justice. They typically create schools and other education experiences that supplement standard and sometimes substandard educational offerings, and they offer quality education at an affordable cost. Generally, minority-serving institutions have a history of determination and commitment from their founding philanthropic and religious organizations. A number of them were established by certain religious denominations and or philanthropic organizations. And with the purpose of forging quality preparation and effective practice despite the lack of support from time to time from the general population. In the case of historically black colleges, universities, and tribal colleges, they typically have endured for three primary reasons. One being the uplift of race, the other is the maintenance of their culture, and then another, the pursuit of socioeconomic justice. As my colleagues, a number of you may know Ana Maria Villegas and Jacqueline Jordan Irvine, they provide that minority-serving institutions create environments that improve the academic outcomes and student experiences of students, such as serving as advocates and cultural brokers, confronting issues of racism through teaching, developing caring and trusting relationships with students, using culturally relevant teaching, and have high expectations for students. And in terms of affordable cost, according to Mary Beth Gassman, who's the director of the Penn Center on minority institutions, serving institutions, people have figured out that minority serving institutions are a really good value. She estimates that costs average at least $10,000 less per year at minority-serving institutions than at similar predominantly white institutions. She says that we understand that these institutions typically have small endowments and can offer only limited financial aid beyond the financial programs. So students are less likely to be able to use cutting-edge technology or luxuriate in plush dorms and athletic facilities, but they do get a quality education. And let's talk a little bit more. Minority-serving institutions take into account cultural characteristics and incorporate them into their teacher preparation programs. So, for instance, Jackie Jordan Irvine provides the African American teachers view teaching as telling, guiding, facilitating, mastery of the much heralded content standards, but they also believe teaching is defined as caring, as mothering, demanding the best, and responding to one's calling and discipline. Similarly, Sonia Nieto also talks about the other mothering concept, or that the teachers often seem to be as if they belong to their family, as if the teacher might be one of their aunts or cousins, which is something that advantages and makes students of color feel more comfortable as they're coming to school to learn. There's also similar research that indicates that Asian American teachers also feel very comfortable when where they're acknowledged for their ancestry, their language, and recognize the challenges of immigration and access and participation in higher education. As I mentioned, minority-serving institutions are explicit in their desire for a culturally diverse program that addresses the needs of the community. Let me offer an example. Here we have two private, similarly sized and ranked colleges. They were arbitrarily selected. One is a majority white institution located in the Northeast. and we'll call that school Harris College, and the other is a historically black institution in the Deep South, and we'll call that institution Charles College. These statements suggest that while each institution works to provide its students with the skills and knowledge to teach, the historically black college or university clearly presents the expectation of its students to serve the community. I think that the differences are very clear if you look at them. And actually, I would ask you to think about taking a close look at the mission statement for your institution or for your school district, and to see whether or not someone who is from a diverse background and or individuals who truly want to work to educate all students would see that your institution would be primed to support them and their learning. As I mentioned earlier, of course, we know that culturally responsive teaching is a term that we have used very, very often. And here is a definition that's offered by Gloria Ladson-Billings, which a number of you should know. It's very, very clear. Culturally responsive teaching is a pedagogy that recognizes the importance of including students' cultural references in all aspects of learning.
Mary, we had a question a little while back. I was kind of hanging on to it, but this is the appropriate time, I think, to bring it up. Rashida had asked about the terms culturally responsive pedagogy and culturally relevant pedagogy, and she was asking if those two terms are synonymous. Can you talk to us about that?
Well, from my perspective, and possibly some might argue with me, but from my perspective, they're synonymous. To me, it's that individuals in their practice recognize and value the background, culture of their students, and deliberately identify approaches to teaching certain lessons that will advantage what it is that the student already knows. So I would not spend a lot of time trying to differentiate between those two terms. Again, similarly, it's knowing the students and using the students' knowledge and background to advantage their learning.
Great, and I know you're going to go into this in more detail, and some of the other questions we had relate to resources to use to help staff develop in this area. So if you can talk about that as we move on, that would be helpful for folks.
Okay, I will do my best. Okay, in the next slide, here we describe the characteristics of culturally responsive teaching, and maybe this will be helpful to some of you. These particular points are offered by Geneva Gay. Recognize culturally responsive teaching recognizes that students' cultural differences affect dispositions, attitudes, and approaches to learning. That it builds bridges between home and school experiences, as well as between academic abstractions and daily realities. Uses a wide variety of instructional strategies that are connected to different learning styles. Teaches students to know and praise their own and each other's cultural heritages, and incorporates multicultural information in all subjects and skills routinely taught in schools. Let me try to offer a couple of examples that may be helpful here. One example may be that a number of us work in school environments where we, on the first day, you're not sure how to pronounce the student's name. And then some of us may make judgments about how it is that youngster's name is spelled. It's like, well, why did they spell it that way? Did they not know how to spell, or did their parents not know the correct spelling of the name? Well, there's a different way to think about that. It may be, and oftentimes it is, a situation where parents are giving their children unique names, a unique spelling to their name, so that to show that they're being creative and in some way distinguishing their children in society. That's one way to distinguish your child. And so I think sometimes we should think that way versus, and I have heard people say this, it's like, well, the parents don't know how to spell, look how they spelled their name. Okay? I think there's a different way to look at it. Another example might be in a vocabulary lesson when a teacher might be asking the students to learn about a wick, a candle wick, a W-I-C-K. And another way to think about it, though, might be that some youngsters from low-income families may know WICS, which is the WIC, which is a special supplemental nutritional program for women, infants, and children, which is otherwise known as food stamps. And so there are a number of youngsters, when you say WIC, they're thinking the grocery store versus a candle. So sometimes another, we just need to open our minds a little bit and understand that students' backgrounds and responses are quite valid from their experiences, and talk to them, and we can learn a little bit from each other in that regard. Here, here is a slide. In this slide, we see this is the model of a university-based work in culturally responsive teaching in science and mathematics. And then when you look at it, it resembles most any program or project that you might work on at a college or university. They developed a comprehensive review of literature. There's a synthesis of the literature into thematic categories, capturing dispositions and behaviors. They're piloting thematic categories with teacher candidates to validate the usefulness of them and generate examples of behavior to represent each category. So there's really nothing unique, I think, about these particular activities that were part of this project. At the same time, the model that these researchers developed also has some thematic categories such as content integration, facilitating knowledge construction, prejudice reduction, social justice, and academic development. And by including these issues, this model presents a promising tool for comprehensively defining culturally responsive teaching in the context of teacher education, as well as to guide curriculum and assessment changes aimed to increase a candidate's culturally responsive knowledge and skills in science and mathematics teaching. There are also some programs, a number of programs that are, if you will, culturally responsive and or situated in minority-serving institutions that focus on STEM. One, for example, is a program it's called the Teacher Residency Academy Alliance, TRA Square, which is a National Science Foundation DRK-12 project that is hosted by Jackson State University in a historically black college in Mississippi, and also Xavier University in New Orleans, which is also a historically black college and university, and the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. And so there are a number, not a lot, but there are a number of programs that focus on math and science and incorporate culturally responsive teaching in them. There are a number of there were a number of questions that I looked at earlier that we received. There was one question asking about teacher education programs that are serving Native American populations, and there are a number of them, and some of them I think are certainly are very good and important, and we'll talk a bit about them later. There also are some questions about, there were also some questions about programs in rural areas. And my sense of it is that the same kinds of things that we work to achieve in urban programs, we also can think about when we're developing programs on rural communities. First and foremost is to know and understand the individuals and within your different your vicinities. In other words, there are rural communities, but there's also diversity within a rural community if you look closely and engage the individuals who live there. A number of rural communities also have migrant populations that, for a variety of reasons, and it's very unfortunate, oftentimes are segregated from the mainstream, if you will, population that is there. And to become better acquainted with these individuals and know and understand their language and culture can certainly enhance practice.
Well, Mary, I think this is a good time to get into our next question for the audience. You've talked quite a bit about some examples and some of the background on the importance of culturally responsive teaching. So now we're interested in hearing from everyone. I know some comments are coming through the parking lot, and people are eager to share. So we'll open up a poll to respond to this question here. What have you seen in teacher education programs that you work with, or maybe those that you've attended, that focus particularly on preparing culturally responsive educators? So we want to hear about your experiences. We get that up and folks have a chance to respond. Let's talk about some of the other questions that are coming in, some discussion and echoing some of the thoughts that you had about the importance of understanding our students and where they come from. Judith is asking if you can talk a little bit about the difference between cultural competency and cultural humility and the impact on teachers. Do you have anything to say about that, Mary?
Can we talk about the difference of cultural competency? I honestly, I'm one that always wants to learn and acknowledges what she does not know. The notion of cultural humility is a new one for me. And but the notion of cultural competence, in my view, relates to what we're talking about. I guess what we're talking about in terms of being able to assess the extent to which an individual is effective in engaging individual students from various backgrounds and cultures. So, but versus cultural humility, I'm sorry, I really would have to look into that a little bit more, or possibly learn from you, Judith, what it is.
That's a great idea. I was going to say the same thing. If Judith can share, maybe an example of how cultural humility is used where she works, that would be probably enlightening for many of us.
Right.
All right, so I see folks are getting some responses together. One of the other questions that we had a little while back, I think you answered this actually with the last example, but I wanted to just mention Ebenezer had asked about resources for pre-service science teachers to mobilize their funds of knowledge that non-dominant students bring to the classroom. So I think maybe that last example you gave provided some good strategies there.
Right. Certainly good places there are certainly good places for people to take a look. Again, the Teacher Residency Academy Alliance is at Jackson State University, and you certainly could find a great deal of information about that program from their website. Also, the National Science Foundation has a very, very good system to identify work that they have supported over time, and there's quite a bit that focuses on cultural diversity or racial, ethnic, and linguistic diversity. And I think that might be a very, very good place to start to look for some programs that have already been funded and are currently operating that are doing that work effectively.
Very good. Norma also asked a little while back about resources for districts who want to work with their staff on developing culturally responsive educators. So you did also talk a little bit about that, through the examples, but if there's anything else you wanted to mention.
Okay. I think that there's absolutely no shortage of centers that are focusing on cultural diversity or diversity in education just generally, and certainly certainly within the PK through 12 setting as well. There's an awful lot of information available. Again, if there's something that, if you see a program that you think looks effective, people are often are very anxious and willing to talk to you about their work, and will definitely refer you to people who they believe are good in that work that possibly would help you. A lot of programs, and actually, in fact, very, very few programs that are funded through federal and private sources or state or private sources have a requirement to collaborate with school districts. They have a requirement to collaborate with the community, and oftentimes they're struggling to figure out who they should connect with. And so if you take the first step by contacting them, the probability of them being helpful will be very, very high.
Mary, if you want to take a glance back at the parking lot, both Nancy and Elizabeth provided definition of cultural humility. Very
yes, similar. I'm looking at it now. Interpersonal stance that it is other or open to other. Wow. Okay. I think from just just taking a glance, it gives me I get the impression that this cultural humility is something where you are more open-minded than you typically would be, and you're thinking beyond the textbook or beyond your personal experience to figure out how you might work with particular students from various backgrounds. And again, I think that is a helpful notion, and I think maybe we all might need to learn a little bit more about that. And I would thank Judith and Nancy for bringing it up.
Mary, let's move into some of the responses. I see a few here of examples of how folks have seen culturally responsive preparation happening in their IHEs.
Right. I'm taking a look now.
I see a lot of the examples fall into this idea of really getting the future educators to think about their own personal beliefs and values and where they stand.
I love this notion Devinder just offered, the cultural iceberg concept. Great term. Has been the starting point for preparing culturally responsive educators. Okay, that's a very thoughtful and intriguing title. I very much like that. I see the program that Jennifer is describing, which is good and seems quite typical, actually, of a number of programs that we know that focus on cultural relevancy. The notion of change agents. I try asking students if they accept the responsibility of being change agents. One concept that it seems very prominent in today's teacher preparation is this notion of social justice and being change agents. And to get a really good sense of how prospective teachers and beginning teachers think about this, one really needs to probe the internet and look at some of the interesting discussions and conversations that they, if you will, millennials, teachers of color, are having about what they feel their role as change agents should or ought to be, and how oftentimes the public school system does not allow them enough room or authority to be able to make some changes that they think that ought to be made. One of the things that some of the research provides is that there is the rate of attrition among teachers of color and new teachers generally is higher than it really should be. And one of the reasons, and the Albert Shanker report will substantiate this, is that the school system and the school environment is not accommodating. It's very standardized. There's a bit too much bureaucracy, and that individuals that are just beginning their career in education don't feel like they're being able to move their students to the levels where they can certainly be, and the teachers, do not necessarily see where their career will move forward being in that situation, which basically calls for a conversation and discussion about public school, not necessarily public school, but school, PK through 12 school reform.
I see a lot of folks sharing resources and references, and that's very helpful. I'll mention that I think some people had asked already, but that we will have a copy of the PowerPoint of the entire webinar, this event, archived, and it will be on the Rel Mid-Atlantic site. There will be also copies of the parking lot, the transcript, as well as the poll responses, the transcripts of those. So I know a lot of good information is being shared here, and you all want to take a look at those in more detail. Those will be available on the Rel site in just a few weeks. So in the interest of time, I know we'll have another opportunity or two for folks to share some more experiences, but Mary, let's move on to the next section and have you talk a little bit more about some different examples.
Okay. Well. Okay. Let's talk about some of the ways that minority-serving institutions or diverse institutions meet student needs and preferences. Just generally, first of all, it's clear that we need to consider student needs and preferences in programs. Oftentimes, we look at it as the program is this way and the students need to fit into it. And from time to time, I think that it's useful to take advantage and take a closer look at what it is that the students actually need and what the students actually want as we're trying to prepare them. There's an author named Gist, G-I-S-T, that mentions if the experiences of teacher candidates of color are overlooked or ignored by administrative leaders and teacher educators when they develop program policies, practices, and curriculum, then it can be the case that teacher candidates of color experience a type of double bind in their teacher preparation programs that can work to perpetuate the cycle of systematic challenges to their educational aspirations. And then in another place she mentions, teacher candidates of color can experience a type of double bind in which their personal ties encounter a program structure that mitigates or devalues cultural and linguistic affiliations and connections through the lack of faculty and student diversity. And in this statement, she does emphasize the matter of having a diverse faculty, which we mentioned a little bit earlier on. And also, we also should consider that just generally speaking, individuals do not necessarily want to be the only one standing out all the time. And so if the institution or the program works to engage a critical mass of individuals from diverse programs, it is more comforting than just identifying maybe one student that you would include in your program and consider it diverse and comfortable. Again, some of the ways that minority-serving institutions meet student needs and preferences are that they may provide open enrollment access. They certainly offer academic support services. They address financial strength, and they connect with community and culture. Let me show you an example about open enrollment. The Paul Quinn College is a historically black college and university college in Dallas, Texas. And with their open enrollment, let me back up. all programs want to be sure that they are enrolling quality students. So it's what a situation of open enrollment calls for is allowing individuals to come into the program and to work with them to make certain that they will be successful as they proceed through the program. So for instance, at Paul Quinn College, all new students are required to attend a 1-month, 6-credit bridge program the summer before enrolling, and that includes personality assessments, etiquette training, mock interviews, and bonding activities. And according to Mary Beth Gassman, again, the director of the Penn Center, Minority Serving Institutions, the message is that your success is my success. There is a spirit of cooperation and collectivism, often missing at more competitive institutions. An example of offering academic support services at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, which is a historically black college, black university. To some extent, they are addressing what a number of individuals of color experience, which is test apprehension. Everyone has, I think, a little bit of apprehension when they take tests or assessment. And as we know, teaching is one of the most highly tested bachelor level degree programs that there is. However, when an institution identifies that early on, they can establish support services that will help alleviate some of that tension. The faculty at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore makes it clear to their students that they expect them to prepare for their licensure exams in a similar way to students preparing for licensure in professions such as law, medicine, or social work. The university's the tool that they use is a program called Learning Plus System, an online system developed by ETS that provides a set of computer-based diagnostic tests, practice tests, and more than 35 hours of instruction in each of the 3 content areas to help college students and other learners improve their basic academic skills. We could have a webinar devoted to issues of testing and assessment, but this is not the webinar to do that. This table just acknowledges or shows that there are disparities in test-taking performance by race and ethnicity. The table on this slide provides information on group means on the Practice 1 test and this information is from a 2011 ETS report. And as you will note, the gaps shown in the table are not uniform across tests or racial ethnic groups. Minority serving institutions and the testing industry continue to work to understand and alleviate performance issues. So for instance, in looking at this table, and again, this was from 2011, African American test takers, mathematics and reading show the largest gaps, followed by writing. In the case of Hispanic test takers, the gap is largest in mathematics, followed by reading and writing. Asian test takers have the greatest gap between their average performance and white test takers' average performance in the area of reading, followed by writing, and then mathematics, which has the smallest gap. The largest gaps in the table are in the area of mathematics, where the average mean scores of African American test takers are over 8 scale points lower than the average mean score of white test takers. And again, this is from 2011, and as you know, in a number of states, certainly not all states, the Practice 1 examination is used as an entrance to a teacher preparation program. And again, we continue to work on the challenges to identify issues around the test-taking performance between individuals from various racial and ethnic backgrounds.
Mary, this is actually a question Christina asked right before you posted this slide, but I think part of her question may be still kind of unanswered, and I don't know if you have any thoughts about it. Just in reference to maybe some of the supports or remedies that you've seen be successful in bridging these gaps between the racial or ethnic groups in their test performance. Is there anything you've seen in your experience to work well, that teacher prep programs are doing to support those candidates in improving their performance?
Well, let me say this. I think I see where she said the test has there's been a huge, it's a huge barrier, and a number of people indicate that it is. There are the issue of testing and individuals of color trying to pursuing the teaching profession has been around for at least 25 years, 25, 30 years. And by and large, institutions that conscientiously work with individuals to make certain that they have the skills to successfully perform on these assessments is very, very, very important. I noticed someone mentioned that the test has changed since 2011, and that's absolutely correct. There are a number of support programs that focus on increasing individuals' confidence in using these tests, which have been effective. There are a host of programs and projects out there. I'm sure a number of people in the audience are familiar with them. But what it takes is a deliberate work on the part of the institution to make sure that these individuals have the opportunity to perform well on them. Again, we could do a whole webinar just on fair tests and assessment, but this would not be the occasion. But it is a very good question. It's not gone away. The other thing is that we always ought to consider, and I think we've heard it a little bit more loudly in another sector in the past few years, is high stakes testing and how much testing predicts how well an individual is going to perform. And there are other indicators. There are indicators in addition to or other than tests that can give us clues as to how well an individual will perform in the classroom or elsewhere. So, again, we could have a huge conversation on this.
Fair enough. Let's move into the next part. I know we got about 25 minutes left, and you still got quite a bit we want to talk about. So I'm happy to move right along.
Okay. All right. In terms of addressing financial constraints, this table shows minority-serving institutions also work to address the financial constraints of their students that are often heavier than for students of color than for others. This table shows that 4 years after earning a bachelor's degree, African-American graduates in the 2008 cohort held $24,720 more student loan debt than white graduates at $52,726 versus $28,600 on average. In the 1993 cohort, the difference was less than, $2,000, $8,723 versus $6,917, and the amounts are adjusted to $2,012. This table basically shows that Hispanic and Asian graduates have debt burdens much more similar to white students, and we also see from this table that the black-white disparity in student loan debt more than triples after graduation. So again, minority-serving institutions that enroll a significant number of individuals from groups other than white will likely, oftentimes, have to work diligently to try to find resources for these individuals to enroll and to graduate without huge financial burdens. Okay. Another thing that institutions that serve a significant proportion of minority of individuals from diverse backgrounds would be connecting with community and culture. There are a number of examples where this happens. I would mention that the University of Nevada, Las Vegas is currently is hosting a new program sponsored by the state called Opening Pathways for Students of Color into Teaching Profession. And in an effort to increase the number of high school and college students from diverse backgrounds who pursue teaching, the program, among other things, holds monthly weekend meetings at different community locations around the city to facilitate parental and family involvement. Again, this is oftentimes we fail to connect with the family, particularly for individuals coming from different diverse populations, and there is research and evidence to show that for certain populations that family and what the family thinks of them pursuing a teaching career has a great level of influence, more so than it would be possibly for students that are students who are white. So that is very, very important to include individuals from parents and family in the conversation and helping and let them understand or know what it is that will be happening in the university or college or the program. Gassman and her, Mary Beth Gassman and her colleagues at Penn Center also offer some examples from the Stone Child College's teacher education program. They offer that it strives to incorporate tribal culture through its teacher education curriculum and aligns teacher education with tribal values such as mindfulness, healing, and harmony with nature. Lesson plans use real community contexts such as mathematics, the mathematics behind building a teepee, for instance. There's a program that I'm familiar with that I visited a while back that was in Tupelo, Mississippi, that was to prepare African American teachers for national board certification. The program clearly understood the community and the needs of the participants, and it was scheduled in the early evening. It had a separate space for the teachers' school-age children so that they could do their homework. It had a space for infants, and it also offered a dinner that included greens, macaroni and cheese, and fried chicken. And so it met the individual's needs and gave them the space and the comfort to be able to do the study and work that they needed to do.
Okay. Okay, well, here we are with another poll, and we'll move through this pretty quickly because we are running out of time here. But we're, again, interested in finding out from you about some of the supports and resources that you find helpful in adopting some of the practices that have been presented today, or others that are relevant to the work you do. We've heard a little bit about challenges from folks today, challenges to making culturally responsive practice a reality in places you work, but we're hoping that some of you will have some great ideas to share with us about what is working well. So we'll put up another poll, give you a moment to put together some answers to that question. Looks like maybe folks are having a hard time coming up with some examples here. Mary, do you have some thoughts on maybe some specific resources or supports that you have seen to be effective in helping folks adopt these type of practices?
I think there are a number of things to think about. One would be to make certain that there is buy-in from stakeholders. And by the stakeholders, I would mean not just necessarily the dean from a particular college or university or the superintendent of the school district, but also to be certain that the faculty, PK through 12, as well as the faculty at the university, understand the need, necessity, and desirability of diversifying the program and individuals that participate in it. In addition to that, I can't overstate enough the importance of getting the community to know and understand what it is that the program is trying to do, and to genuinely invite them to the table and listen to what it is that they have to say, that they feel that their needs would be for the types of teachers that they have teaching in their schools, or the type of program that their young people might participate in. So those are some of the supports that I think would be necessary.
Yes, and of course that ties back to what you started. Part of this conversation was talking about the mission statement and making sure that that really speaks to the objectives of the university and what they're hoping to achieve. And then the programming flows from that and ensures that there are programs that allow for that mission to be enacted.
Correct.
Very good. Well, let's move on from this. Folks, if you have examples you do want to share, feel free to post those in the parking lot as we move forward.
Okay. Okay. One thing I should mention, again, and I think we mentioned it several times before, there is a Center for Minority Serving Institutions located at the University of Pennsylvania under the directorship of Mary Beth Gassman. It is a very, very good resource for research data and best practices. and ideas about minority-serving institutions. And as I understand that they are now working on a project that focuses on teacher preparation in minority-serving institutions, so you certainly might want to check that out. Okay. And we move to action steps. Promising practices. A number of these practices or ideas or thoughts that we've mentioned throughout our time are things that any institution can consider in one way or another. In terms of recruiting diverse faculty or diverse students, again, we need proactive recruitment strategies. It's not just posting in small print at the bottom of an ad for a program or a vacancy that we would like to have diverse individuals, or we welcome diverse individuals. You really have to go out into the community and make it clear that this is what it is, this is what you intend and want to do. Again, engage in a range of retention strategies. Once individuals have come to your program or come to the doorstep, talk about what it is that they want and need, and that will help keep them there. If you are telling them what it is that you're going to give without listening to what it is that they need, you might be subject to failure. Experiment with fast-tracking programs and building partnerships and pathways. Certainly, we talked a little bit about this before. Programs that are, I wouldn't necessarily call it fast-tracking. That's not a term I would use. But programs that allow individuals to move along in a program, but also something that is not going to interrupt to a great extent their quality of life. And for instance, they recognize that a number of individuals have to work. The University of Hawaii Manoa is a good example of a program that does that, that works with individuals who work on one island in the Hawaiian Islands for during the week, and then once a month they fly to the main campus for programs, for academic programs, recognizing that individuals do have to work. Partnerships, again, it's important to sincerely and genuinely engage with the community and business and otherwise in your community. That would be helpful. And then integrate discussions of diversity and equity into coursework as well as into everything else. Those are just some ideas that that are helpful. Let me look. Let me move on here. Okay. Again, maintain close and reciprocal relationships with local school districts and the larger surrounding community. And for school districts, the same. We would say keep close and reciprocal relationships with colleges and universities. Oftentimes what we find is individuals will attend a college and university, secure their degree, go to a school system, but they never come back to the university and just say, here are some things that I've learned while I've been in practice, and so these are some things that we might be able to change, adjust, or improve on, and here's some ways that we might collaborate. Secondly, the opportunity to create regular and ongoing opportunities to learn in authentic classroom and community environments. This is something that's desirable to most all teacher preparation students and also students from diverse communities as well. It's particularly important as by and large a good number of them indicate that the reason why they are going into the profession is to help the community. And also, there's the notion of service learning or community service that is also very, very attractive and something that a number of institutions can certainly incorporate quite easily. In terms of school and district leadership. Here are some things that we have, the research indicates that are important or to consider from a school and district level. Closely examine the hiring and distribution practices of the school district to discern how placements in hard and staffed schools are made. Oftentimes, teachers of color are situated in hard to staffed schools. Sometimes they may want to be there, but sometimes they may not. And sometimes it's important to look to see where individuals are being placed. To review the motivation, rewards, and incentives of beginning teachers to teach certain subjects such as special education. What we find is that there are certain areas like special education, English language learner, and a few others where that teachers of color generally gravitate towards, and I think that we need to better know and understand what that is. Also, we understand again that there's a motivation. We need to take a look at the motivation, rewards, and incentives of teachers of color to teach in public charter schools. The data indicates that they do, but we're not exactly sure why. And so that's something to look into. And then provide opportunities for all educators, including pre-service teachers, to learn and implement culturally responsive teaching strategies during coursework in teacher education programs, induction programs, and ongoing professional development. These are practices, again, that almost any institution can certainly do. Again, we talked a little bit about the minority teacher turnover rate being higher than it should. And so a couple of things that the research suggests that might alleviate some of this is to provide more teacher classroom discretion and autonomy, and provide higher levels of faculty input into school decision making. This is also something that the Learning Policy Institute, Linda Darling Hammond's Institute here in Washington, also indicates. And here is the synthesis. Now, it's really hard to synthesize all this information that we've talked about, but here are some points to take away to think about. Student diversity is growing, but teacher diversity is not, and there's something that we really need to do about that. There's a need for teachers with similar backgrounds and cultural competence to help close the achievement gap. We should know and understand that. Minority-serving institutions can play an important role in increasing teacher diversity and preparing educators who are culturally responsive. And institutions of higher education should engage in proactive recruitment and retention strategies for pre-service teachers from underrepresented groups and work collectively with school districts.
Very good. Thank you, Mary. I know we kind of rushed a little through that last section, but I think it's important for folks to kind of keep in mind those summary points. And as you said, it's hard to summarize such a broad topic, and I think we really, like you mentioned, hit the tip of the iceberg today. And I know that the sharing, both in the parking lot and through the polls, was just as helpful as everything you had to share with us.
Yeah. I look forward to reading. I look forward to reading it when I have more time. It really is a very good point. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, a very fascinating topic, and certainly impacting the work we all do. We do always like to close out our webinars with 2 final questions for our participants, and because we expect that these webinars are really working to support you in the work you do out in the field, we want to hear what you're taking away from the presentation and then what action steps you might be planning to take as a result of what you learned today. So we'll pop those 2 up, give you a moment or 2 to put some ideas together there. And I see, Mary, you might want to glance over at the parking lot. Some real great conversation was happening in parallel to your final thoughts there.
Right. Um, I've heard a number of places, and I'm reacting a little bit to Iris's comment about she's reviewed many resumes. Consider what criteria you're looking for in positions. Applications for university programs, alternative route programs, or as employees in schools and school districts. Consider taking a look at it because, as we know, the current generation of individuals of color is the largest generation of color. The millennials is the greatest generation of color that we've had in the United States ever. There is no shortage of individuals from diverse backgrounds that are available to us. And somehow or another, I think what's most important is to, again, know and understand what their needs are and examine what our expectations are, and think about that when we're having recruitment efforts and professional development plans.
What a good suggestion. Very good. So lots of ideas coming up here in response to our 2 questions. Folks really thinking about these issues and how to better attract the students that they want in their programs. Definitely looking into those resources and all of the various conversations we've had today.
Right. I really appreciate a number of these ideas. They're good ideas. And I really look forward to looking at all the comments in the parking lot that I didn't have a chance to read closely. Yeah.
We'll leave this up for about 30 seconds more to give folks a chance to finish out your thoughts. But I do want to thank you, Mary. We can give you a virtual round of applause for the time you spent with us, not only today, but in preparing today's presentation and helping us think critically about this topic. And hopefully folks will be going out and actually taking action in many places around the country. So we look forward to hearing about that work you all are doing. So again, virtual round of applause for Mary.
A virtual round of applause for the audience. Again, you have some exceptional thoughts and ideas, and I really look forward to taking a look at them, and do hope that you found something that will be useful to you as you work towards a more diverse profession.
All right, so I'm going to just take us through a couple closing slides. If you do have questions or comments for us in general about the webinar series, you can see my contact information there. If you have particular questions or comments about today's topic, you can reach out to Mary, and her email's there, or in general, the Rel Mid-Atlantic information is there as well. We do have one final webinar for this year, and it nicely follows from this topic. We'll be talking about closing the achievement gap with Richard Gray. That'll be in just a few short weeks here on December 15th. So we hope you'll check out that description and join us for that event. We do also very much value your input, and we want to hear from you about what we're doing well and what we can improve. So we hope you'll take a few minutes to fill out our evaluation survey and give us your feedback. Again, we thank you all for being part of today's webinar, and we hope you have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.